I have a love of China. I love Chinese people. I just don't like the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party. The great free trader of the 19th century, Richard Cobden, he also led the campaign in Parliament against trade in the Opium Wars, against the slave trade, because he said there are limitations. So both the owning of other people as slaves, he said that wasn't acceptable, and also the trade in opium, which did so much damage in China, was unacceptable. There was a 4-day parliamentary debate, and at the end of it, he won by a small majority, but majority of 16, and so that reversed British policy, just as Wilberforce had reversed British policy on the slave trade. And really the battle in our own day is about, is it legitimate to trade with nations who are themselves carrying out acts of genocide? And you can think of examples in the world today where there are allegations of genocide. You can think about countries where there are allegations of slave labor. And you have to ask the question, should we be trading on the backs of people who are enslaved? Should we be trading on the backs of people who may be subject to the crime above all crimes, genocide?
A lot of this debate is centered around China at the moment. Trading with China, in your opinion, it does damage human rights in China, but does also damage the UK people or not?
First of all, the amendment, of course, doesn't mention China. The amendment is about genocide. But what it would enable, for instance, a group of Uyghurs, if they wish to, if they say that they have credible evidence that there is slave labor, but also that they are subject to the categories defined, the very high threshold in the 1948 Convention on the Crime of Genocide, that they are being subjected to, for instance, forced sterilization, that they're being subjected to the disruption of their family's life, the destruction of their national identity. All of these are the issues that arise when you define something to be a genocide. If they were able to put that before a court of law and demonstrate that that was so, then of course there ought to be implications, not just for trade, but for the way we deal with a country in those circumstances. It can't then be business as usual.
I think my last question is also, again, China, because I've seen that there's the CGTN and the BBC thing, and then 2 days ago, the law was debated about Beijing Olympics. So it appears that there's a growing appetite to push back against China's either human rights record and influence in the UK. Where do you see this going? And
it's interesting we're having this interview on the new Lunar New Year. I have a love of China. I love Chinese people. I just don't like the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party. And anyone who has studied the Cultural Revolution or recalls what happens at Tiananmen Square, anyone who has seen what happened in Tibet, a place I visited, or what's now happening in Western China, or what's happened to groups like the Falun Gong, or you look at what's happened to Christians or dissenters or lawyers, people like the young woman who went to Wuhan, who was a citizen journalist and still languishing in a prison because she dared to report on what she believed to be things that the world needed to know. Or you think about Hong Kong and what's happening there today, or the threats that have been made to Taiwan. I think that's a tragedy for the Chinese people. And I hope that it won't continue. I hope that we'll see reform and change, and that there will be the opportunity then for people to live harmoniously alongside one another in the future.
大纪元时报遍布全球，不受财团、政党影响，真实敢言。不管是想了解国际局势、两岸议题，或者想要寓教于乐、丰富人生，您需要的都在大纪元时报。订报专线0800566688。